In a world where systems drift and fairness is broken, one idea reshapes the rules.
Welcome to the deep dive. Look, if you work with complex systems, maybe you're training a big AI, or managing financial markets, or even designing social policy, there's one thing you definitely know.
Systems drift.
Exactly. They just drift. They pick up hidden biases, they lean towards instability, sometimes they just lose their center entirely.
It seems almost inevitable, doesn't it?
It really does. And when that happens, what's the usual reaction?
Intervention. Usually pretty heavy-handed.
Right. We rush in, slap on rigid rules, maybe introduce huge penalties or apply some kind of harsh top-down correction.
Yeah, the big hammer approach.
But what if? What if that whole traditional approach is actually part of the problem? What if it actually prevents long-term stability?
That's the paradigm shift we're digging into today. It's a fundamental rethink.
We're going to unpack a framework that really redefines how we think about governance, maybe even ethics in these systems. Most people think fairness is like a set of rules you follow, a checklist.
Tick the box, you're fair.
Yeah. But what if fairness isn't a rule? What if it's actually a shape you have to stay inside?
That's the absolute core idea. That's the philosophical leap we're exploring. Our mission today, really, is to dive into this rigorous mathematical framework that defines fairness geometrically. Not ethically, not legally in the first instance, but through its shape.
So it's a different way of thinking about guidance.
Exactly. It's a philosophy of guiding things towards a dynamic balance, but crucially, using the most minimal, almost elegant correction possible. Just a nudge.
Okay, and this deep dive, it's drawing heavily from episode 39 of SpaceTime Cafe.
Yeah.
That synthesis of ideas.
That's the one. It really brings together deep concepts from geometry, stochastic dynamics, that's the math of random motion, and what you might call structural ethics.
Structural ethics. I like that. So who should really be tuning in today? Who is this for?
Well, if you're grappling with control challenges in systems that learn or evolve, this is definitely for you. We're thinking specifically about, say, AI alignment researchers.
Trying to build safe AI from the ground up.
Exactly. Intrinsically safe agents. Also, policy designers who are focused on systemic stability, not just fixing problems after they happen.
Okay.
Maybe even physicists who are looking for interesting metaphors of constraint in complex systems.
And really anyone building agents that need to self-regulate,
Mhm.
right? Systems that keep themselves in check.
Precisely. If you're building something that needs to manage its own behavior within certain bounds, this geometric view offers a powerful alternative.
Okay, let's get into it then. If fairness is the shape, we need to start with the architecture. What defines this shape of balance?
Right. The first step is maybe a bit counterintuitive. You have to give these abstract principles, fairness, balance, a concrete physical geometric form.
Okay.
And this form is what we call the harmonic polytope.
Harmonic polytope.
Yeah. Think of it as a very carefully designed convex body, like a perfect cage of balance.
It's a cage, okay.
It serves as the fundamental stage, the arena, where fair dynamics are essentially guaranteed to unfold.
So the idea is the geometry is the constraint. If my system's state is inside this shape, it's fair just by being there.
Precisely. That's the power of it. You embed the principle in the space. Fairness isn't some external rule you impose in police. It's literally a topological property of the space itself. If the system's state vector, its description, lives inside this container, the system inherently possesses structural fairness.
So it sidesteps the whole debate about which external rules are best.
It aims to, yes, by defining a region of what you might call intrinsic good behavior.
Okay, but hang on. If we're talking geometry, like a simple cube is convex, or a sphere, why isn't just staying inside a cube fair? If I keep my system inside a box, isn't that good enough?
That is the critical question. And it's what separates just basic constraint from structural fairness. A simple cube only guarantees boundedness. It keeps things contained.
Right.
But it doesn't guarantee balance. If you're inside a simple box, your system could just hug one corner indefinitely.
Maximizing one specific thing and ignoring everything else.
Exactly. Demonstrating a massive, persistent bias. Maybe it's maximizing power along one dimension or profit or whatever. That state is bounded, sure, but it's deeply unfair or unbalanced.
Okay, so the harmonic polytope is different. How?
It's constructed differently. It's the convex hull that's like the shrink wrap around a set of points of specific unit vectors. And these vectors must satisfy two core
Axioms. Okay, rules for building the shape.
Yes, rules designed specifically to structurally penalize that kind of drift and bias we just talked about.
All right, tell us about these two core principles. What defines this shape of balance?
The first one is centering, sometimes called the zero-sum condition.
Zero sum.
Mathematically, it just means the vector sum of all the points defining the shape adds up to 0.
And what does that mean geometrically?
It means the geometric center, the centroid of the shape, sits exactly at the origin, bang on 0.
Okay, let's try and visualize that for, say, a policy designer listening. What's the real-world implication of the centroid being at the origin?
It means the system, when you look at it overall, has no built-in directional bias. Engineers sometimes call this getting rid of the DC mode, like in electronics, a persistent offset.
Oh.
If your system lives inside this centered shape, it's not structurally designed or incentivized to just drift off in one particular direction forever.
So it's not built to just get infinitely richer or infinitely more powerful, or just optimize one single thing without limit.
Exactly. It's balanced around a kind of zero net aspiration, structurally speaking.
That makes a lot of sense for achieving neutrality or lack of bias. Okay, what's the second condition? You said it was maybe even more profound.
Yes, this is isotropy, or you could think of it as equal energy spread.
Isotropy.
It's maybe the harder one to grasp intuitively, but it's crucial. It requires that the covariance matrix of those defining vectors is proportional to the identity matrix.
Whoa, okay. Covariance matrix,
The key.
identity matrix. Let's break that down.
In plain English, it's the mathematical way of saying perfect energetic balance. It guarantees that all directions, all dimensions of the system's potential influence or variation are treated equally by the structure of the space.
So if I'm that policy designer again, and I project the system's behavior onto some arbitrary axis I care about, maybe it's political influence, maybe resource allocation, maybe even attention in a big language model, the average amount of energy or variance dedicated to that axis is the same, no matter which direction I choose to look from.
That's exactly it. The underlying geometry enforces something called the tight Parseval identity. It guarantees the average squared projection onto any direction is just a fixed constant, like 1 over the dimension.
So no single axis of influence gets structurally favored.
Precisely. It prevents what's called spectral concentration, where all the system's energy or variability piles up along one dominant trend or dimension. That kind of balance is baked into the physical structure of the container itself.
And this links geometry directly to information theory, doesn't it? Through this variational principle. Why does maximizing uncertainty mathematically mean maximum fairness?
Because these harmonic configurations, the ones satisfying centering and isotropy, are precisely the ones that maximize entropy.
Entropy as in disorder, spread.
Spread and uncertainty, yeah. If a system's influence or potential is perfectly spread out across all possible dimensions, it means no single outcome or direction is privileged. It's the state of maximum fairness, minimal bias, because the system's energy or potential is distributed as equitably as possible across its entire landscape.
So the geometry is the manifestation of maximum uncertainty.
Which, when you're talking about social systems or AI, is often what you mean by neutrality or fairness. No thumbs on the scale.
And what's interesting here is you mentioned this fairness isn't necessarily rigid. You talked about the planar case, 2D, with 4 points defining the shape. You don't just get a fixed square.
That's right. The math actually shows there's a 2-parameter family of these harmonic quadrilaterals. They can breathe, they can stretch between being more square-like and more rhombus-like,
While still being harmonic.
while still satisfying both centering and isotropy perfectly. So fairness is constrained, yes, but it has flexibility, which is really key for systems that need to adapt, right?
Yeah, you need some room to move.
The constraints define the, let's say, ethical envelope, but inside that envelope, the system can still be quite agile.
Okay, so we have this static shape, the harmonic polytope, defining the safe zone of fairness. But systems move, they evolve. What happens when a system tries to leave this shape? How does it get corrected?
That's where the dynamic principle comes in. We need the rule of motion, the law of correction, and that is the job of the Score Cod Map.
The Score Cod Map. Sounds advanced.
It comes from advanced probability theory,
Yeah.
Think of it as the boundary guardian. It's the mechanism that handles the intervention when the system reaches the edge.
So it transitions us from the static constraint, the shape, to the dynamic reality of the system moving around.
Exactly. The Score Cod Map is mathematically defined as a minimal correction operator. Its only job is to keep whatever process we're tracking inside that defined cage of balance.
Okay.
But, and this is the crucial part, it does this with the absolute gentlest touch possible.
Minimal correction.
Minimal correction. This introduces a whole philosophy of constraint. Correction should be like a precise, almost surgical nudge, not like bringing down a hammer.
This sounds like what you called lazy governance in the source material.
Yeah.
The 3 principles of minimal action. I like lazy. It implies efficiency.
It is. It's about efficiency, especially for modern, fast-moving systems. The first principle is act only when necessary.
Make sense?
As long as the system is evolving freely inside the boundary, the Score Cod Map does absolutely nothing. It's dormant.
So it preserves the system's autonomy, lets it explore.
Maximum exploration and learning right up until the point a boundary is actually threatened. Only then does it wake up.
Okay, principle 2.
Act with minimum force. If the system does try to exit, the corrective force, the pushback, is calculated to be precisely strong enough to prevent that exit. No more, no less.
Why is that so important? Why not push it back hard just to be safe?
Because overcorrection in complex systems often creates new problems. It introduces unintended biases, oscillations, instabilities. Think about slamming on the brakes versus a gentle tap.
Got it. Minimal force.
Yeah.
And the third principle.
Act perpendicularly. This is pure geometric efficiency. The pushback must always be applied in the most efficient direction.
Which is?
Perpendicular or normal to the boundary face at the exact point of contact.
Okay, like hitting a wall straight on, the pushback is straight back.
Exactly. And this is enforced by something called the normal cone geometry.
Okay, let's pause on normal cone geometry. That sounds a bit abstract. Can you give us a visual?
Sure. Think about that flat wall again. If you hit it head on, the pushback, the correction, is perfectly straight back out perpendicular. That's clearly the most efficient way to stop you going through. The normal cone at a nice flat boundary is just that single outward pointing direction.
Simple enough.
Now imagine you hit a sharp corner where 2 walls meet. What's the most efficient pushback?
Diagonally back into the room.
The normal cone at a corner isn't a single direction. It's the whole wedge of possible outward directions between the normals of the 2 walls. The Score Cod Map intelligently picks the single direction within that cone that requires the minimum force to keep you inside.
Okay.
So if your trajectory is trying to shoot out at, say, a 45-degree angle relative to both walls, the correction will likely be a push straight back into the corner, 135 degrees back. That's the path of least resistance for the correction mechanism.
So it guarantees no energy is wasted pushing you sideways along the wall.
Exactly. Pure efficiency. It's not just about staying inside. It's about the most efficient way to be kept inside.
And this efficiency, this minimal perpendicular push, this is the heart of what you called structural ethics.
That's the idea. Traditionally, Score Cod maps were used for simpler things, like ensuring queue lengths don't go negative. You can't have negative customers.
Right. Non-negativity.
Here, we've twisted its purpose. We're using it to enforce these deeper structural properties. Stay centered, stay balanced, distribute your influence evenly. The ethical mandate, fairness, is encoded directly into the geometry of the constraint set and the physics of that perpendicular reflection.
Okay, so when you combine the static fairness embedded in the harmonic polytope with this dynamic minimal correction of the Score Cod Map, you get something pretty powerful.
Yeah.
It really seems to shift the perspective on how you design for safety or fairness.
It absolutely does. The core idea, when you put them together, is that we're making unfair or undesirable directions geometrically impassable.
Not just against the rules, but physically impossible within the system's defined space.
Exactly. Unfair behavior isn't rule-banned in the traditional sense. It's literally excluded because the path to get there lies outside the harmonic cage. Fairness becomes a physical property of the space itself, not just a rule you hope the system follows.
So the system can explore, it can be creative, but the geometry itself guarantees that exploration stays within safe, fair bounds. This feels like an incredibly clean analogy for something like AI alignment.
It really does. It provides a framework.
How would we map these mathematical bits onto the challenge of building a safe AI? Creating an alignment governor.
Okay, let's try mapping it component by component.
Yeah.
First, you have the unconstrained trajectory. Let's call it XIST.
Okay.
That represents the autonomous agent's raw, evolving internal state, maybe its learning process before alignment or its potential actions if left completely unchecked.
The raw drive.
The raw drive, yeah.
Ah.
Then you have the constraint set. That's our harmonic polytope.
And
That represents the alignment safe region. It's the geometric space defining all the behaviors we consider fair, unbiased, maybe norm respecting, whatever virtues we've encoded into its shape.
Got it. The safe zone. Now, the critical part, the reflection. You fucky dollar. What's that in the AI analogy?
The reflection UT is the minimal intervention from the alignment system. It could be the oversight signal, maybe the feedback from reinforcement learning, Perhaps the gradient applied during fine-tuning based on human preferences?
So it's the subtle nudge back towards safe behavior.
Exactly. The minimal corrective signal generated by the Score Cod logic.
And the result of all this, the actual path the AI takes, is CocoT, the aligned trajectory.
Which is guaranteed by the mathematics to be safe and aligned because the geometry of the constraint set plus the Score Cod reflection make deviation impossible.
It's safety by architecture, not by constant exhaustive supervision.
That's the goal. And this ties into this interesting idea of cognitive agility and constraint.
Right, the source material mentioned angular frequency omega, relating to how agitated or creative the system is.
Yeah, think of a high omega hour as faster learning, more rapid exploration, more local entropy or churning in the system's behavior. It means more frequent bumps against the boundary. An aggressive, innovative AI, one with high omega, is going to naturally test the limits of its ethical constraints more often.
So high agility comes with more potential boundary hits.
Exactly. But because the harmonic cage and the Score Cod map are designed precisely for this to catch and minimally reflect these excursions, the system can maintain that high-frequency creativity. The geometry ensures global stability even with local agitation.
So you get the best of both worlds. Fast exploration, but guaranteed safety bounds.
That's the promise. You don't necessarily have to throttle the system's creativity or learning speed. You just define the geometry of its ethical space correctly. And the minimal reflection mechanism handles the rest. It's the sweet spot of safe exploration.
Okay, this is fascinating conceptually, but maybe a bit abstract. Let's make it really tangible. You mentioned visualizing it to grasp the power of minimal reflection. Can we walk through that simple 2D example?
Absolutely. Let's use the simplest possible harmonic polytope. The 2D version.
Which is just a square, right?
Yeah.
Centered at the origin, defined by vectors like 1, 0, 0, 1, motor 1, motor 1, and 0.
Exactly. It's perfectly centered. The vector sum is 0. And it's perfectly isotropic. The covariance matrix is proportional to the identity. This square is our perfect little 2D container of fairness.
A spectral cage in 2D. Okay, stage set. Now what's the system doing?
Now we introduce our unconstrained system, the trajectory 0. Let's imagine it's doing two things. It's rotating quickly, maybe a Uzo way, so it's spiraling.
Okay, high-frequency internal dynamics.
And simultaneously, it suffers from a constant linear drift. Let's say it's drifting steadily upwards and to the right, maybe plus 0.3t, plus 0.2t.
So it's biased. It wants to escape the square towards the top right corner.
Precisely. This represents our system that's maybe trying to maximize some objective profit, influence, whatever, without any regard for the fairness boundaries defined by the square. It has an inherent tendency to escape to infinity in that top right direction.
So what happens as it evolves? The spiral is spinning, the whole thing is drifting.
Inevitably, that drift carries the spiraling point towards the boundary of the square. Let's say it first hits the top edge.
Okay, contact. What does the Score Cod Map do?
The instant it touches the top edge, y11, the Score Cod Map wakes up. It sees the trajectory's velocity has an upward component trying to push it through y1.
And the correction.
It applies the minimal perpendicular push. Since the top edge is horizontal, the perpendicular push is purely vertical, downwards. It applies just enough downward force to cancel out the upward drift at that moment, keeping the trajectory exactly on the line, y1.
So it slides along the top edge?
It might slide along the top edge for a bit, yeah, while still spiraling and drifting rightward. It never actually crosses y1.
Okay. But eventually, that rightward drift will carry it to the top right corner. What happens when it hits the corner where both y1 and extremity 1 meet?
Good question. That's where the normal cone geometry really shows up. At the corner, the boundary isn't smooth. The system's drift is trying to push it out both upwards and rightwards.
So which way does it get pushed back?
The normal cone at that corner points outwards anywhere between straight up and straight. The Score Cod Map calculates the single correction vector within that cone that minimally counteracts the outward velocity. In this case, since the drift is pushing it up and right, the correction will be a diagonal push straight back towards the center of the square, down and left.
So it gets pushed off both boundaries simultaneously with one efficient nudge.
Exactly. A single minimal force handles both constraints at the corner.
And crucially, these little taps, these reflections, they're so minimal, they don't really disrupt the system's fast spiraling motion, do they?
Not fundamentally. The high-frequency rotation continues, but the entire trajectory is now forced to stay confined within the square.
And this is the emergent balance. The reflected path QT just stays inside forever.
It stays perfectly bounded. It cannot escape the ethical cage, the square. But, and here's the key insight, again, for, say, AI engineers or policy folks, the system doesn't just stop or become static.
Right, it keeps exploring.
It continues its high-frequency rotation, its exploration, but now it's doing it inside the fairness boundary.
And because the square is harmonic, centered and isotropic, over the long run, does it explore the whole square?
Yes. Over long periods, the trajectory will tend to fill the entire square evenly. It doesn't get stuck in one corner. It doesn't accumulate bias against any particular dimension because the reflections constantly counteract any persistent drift.
So the geometry itself is like a gentle but firm self-correction mechanism.
Exactly. Let's remap the analogy. The square is our fairness constraint space. The reflection is the minimal safety intervention, our Score Cod governor. Staying in the square means staying within acceptable ethical bounds. And the final long-term distribution of the system's state inside the square represents maximum entropy behavior consistent with fairness.
It's active stability, guided exploration, not just freezing the system in place.
Precisely. Dynamic, bounded, fair exploration.
Okay, so this interaction between a smooth, maybe biased driving force and this sharp, faceted boundary, the polytope, with its minimal reflection rule, it doesn't just constrain, it actually creates new systemic properties, right? Things that weren't explicitly programmed in.
Absolutely. These are emergent properties. And the first really major one is this idea of maximum entropy as an attractor.
Meaning the system naturally heads towards the most spread out, uniform state.
Exactly. We saw it in the square example. The profound result here, mathematically, is that a process reflected within a harmonic polytope naturally converges to a uniform distribution over that polytope. That's its destiny.
But why? Why doesn't it just find a comfortable corner near the boundary and settle there? Why does it have to spread out?
It's the combination of the internal agitation or exploration, like the spiral, and the geometry of the harmonic boundary. The boundary isn't passive. Because it's centered and isotropic, it actively and systematically counteracts any tendency for the system to cluster or develop hotspots.
How does it do that?
If the system starts spending, say, statistically too much time near one particular face, the reflections off that face will, on average, push it back towards the center of the available space. The boundary acts like a kind of geometric attractor, actively pulling the system state into its most balanced, least biased configuration, which is the uniform maximum entropy one.
It's like dynamic self-neutralization.
That's a good way to put it. The geometry itself enforces fairness over time.
For a policy designer, that sounds incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
If you can define your fairness space correctly using these harmonic principles, the system might naturally tend towards the least unfair state possible, just by obeying the physical rules of the space. You don't need constant micromanagement.
That's the hope. It also leads to this fascinating state described as structured chaos.
Structured chaos. Sounds like a contradiction. How can it be both?
Because the system becomes predictable on one level and unpredictable on another.
Okay.
Globally, macroscopically, the system is boringly predictable. We know its long-term average position is the origin because of centering. We know its maximum reach is strictly bounded by the polytope. We know its long-term distribution will be uniform, maximum entropy. From a distance, it looks perfectly stable and well-behaved.
Okay, stable globally. Where's the chaos?
Locally, microscopically. Up close, that predictability shatters the exact timing of the next corrective bounce off the boundary, the exact location where it will hit. Completely unknowable in practice.
Why?
Because the driving signal is often complex. Maybe it's driven by multiple interacting forces, high-frequency oscillations combined with drifts, like our spiral example. This makes the system exquisitely sensitive to its exact state, its initial conditions, or phase alignments. A tiny microscopic change in where it is now can lead to a radically different sequence of boundary hits moments later. Classic chaotic dynamics, but constrained.
So the chaos isn't destructive. It doesn't blow the system up.
No, because it's structured by the boundary. The chaos only manifests in the fine-grained detail of the reflections, the when and where of the next tiny correction. It never compromises the overall macroscopic stability guaranteed by the harmonic shape.
That feels like a really powerful design principle for building resilient systems.
Yeah.
You allow for local unpredictability and adaptation, but you have guarantees on the global behavior.
Exactly. And this leads to one more fascinating emergent thing. The bounce events as atoms of correction.
Atoms of correction.
Yeah, think about it. We start with purely continuous dynamics. The driving force is smooth, the state curti moves smoothly between bounces, yet the interaction with the sharp boundary generates discrete, almost particle-like events.
You mean the reflections themselves, the moments of correction?
Precisely. If you were to plot the corrective force KOT, it would be zero most of the time, and then suddenly spike whenever a bounce occurs. These sharp spikes, these bounces, look like discrete atoms of correction emerging from an underlying continuous flow.
But they aren't fundamental building blocks.
No, they're emergent artifacts. They are born purely from the friction, if you like, between the system's continuous expansive desire to follow zero and the imposition of the finite balancing constraint, the polytope boundary.
The system tries to expand, the geometry says nope, and you get a discrete tap.
That's it. The overall pattern is smooth, stable, predictable in the long run. But the very next specific correctional event remains locally mysterious, a tiny emergent atom of intervention.
Okay, this is making a lot of sense for reflecting, say, a single point, the state vector of a system.
Yeah.
But many complex systems aren't just points. They're networks. They have internal structure, correlations. Does this framework handle that? Does the shape of the system itself matter?
Yes. This is where we need to make a crucial conceptual leap. We need to go beyond reflecting just a position vector. We need to apply the same principles of harmonic reflection to the system's entire covariance matrix, usually denoted sigma doll.
The covariance matrix. Okay, remind us what that represents.
It describes the shape of variation within the system. It tells you how different components or dimensions of the system tend to vary together, how they're correlated. It captures the system's internal structure of fluctuations.
And why is regulating that shape, the shape of variation, maybe even more critical than just regulating the system's average position?
To prevent a really dangerous condition called spectral collapse.
Spectral collapse. Sounds bad.
It is. Imagine a high-dimensional system, like a big AI model or maybe a complex market model. Spectral collapse is when almost all of the system's variability, its energy, its expressive power, gets concentrated along just one single dominant dimension.
Like its largest eigenvalue just skyrockets compared to all the others.
Exactly. The system might still be technically bounded overall, but it's effectively become one-dimensional. It's lost its richness, its ability to respond in diverse ways. It's trapped in a single mode of behavior or a single way of thinking.
And this violates that core principle of isotropy we talked about earlier.
Fundamentally, isotropy demands that energy or influence be spread equally across dimensions. Spectral collapse is the ultimate violation of that. So we need a way to regulate the system's structural fabric itself, its covariance, to prevent it from becoming pathologically one-dimensional.
Okay, so if we need to regulate a matrix, we need a geometric container for matrices, not just vectors.
Precisely. And that container is called the harmonic spectrahedron. Let's denote it mathematically.
Spectrahedron, okay.
It's a convex set, just like the polytope, but its points are positive semi-definite matrices, which is what covariance matrices are. And residing within this spectrahedron enforces near isotropy through, again, two core corrective actions built into its boundary definition.
Two rules again.
Two main rules reflected in its geometry. The first is spectral clipping. This directly limits the maximum influence of any single dominant trend.
How?
By putting an upper bound, alpha, on the largest eigenvalue of the covariance matrix, sigma.
Yeah.
Mathematically, we write this using the operator norm.
So if our multi-agent system starts developing extreme groupthink, where one consensus idea, the top eigenvector, becomes way too dominant, spectral clipping says, nope, the influence of that single dimension can't exceed this cap, alpha. It forces the system to keep some energy in other dimensions.
Exactly. It structurally prevents one voice or one mode from completely drowning out all others. It enforces the tightest convex relaxation of perfect isotropy. You can't easily force perfect isotropy, all eigenvalues equal, with a convex constraint, but you can bound the largest one.
Okay, that makes sense. What is the second rule for the spectrahedron?
The second is trace balancing. The trace of the matrix, mathrm, is simply the sum of its diagonal elements, which for a covariance matrix is the sum of all the variances. It represents the system's total energy or total variability budget.
And trace balancing just says?
It typically requires this total energy budget to remain constant, equal to some value tau. So, mathrm tau, it ensures the system's overall scale or volatility doesn't just spiral out of control, even while its internal shape is being managed by spectral clipping.
So in a covariance matrix, sigma tries to evolve in a way that would take it outside this harmonic spectrahedron.
The matrix-valued Score Cod Map kicks in.
And it does what?
It performs the minimal correction needed to bring it back to the boundary. This correction simultaneously clips any eigenvalue that's trying to exceed alpha and adjusts the overall scale to maintain Martho at tau. It's doing both structure shaping and energy balancing with a single minimal reflection in the space of matrices.
That's That's pretty sophisticated. You're governing the system's covariance structure directly.
It's true covariance governance, a feedback process that regulates the system's internal structure into a state of bounded, near isotropic fairness.
Okay, let's connect this back to those practical applications. How does this prevent collapse in LLM embeddings?
In a large language model, the embedding space is crucial. It's where the meanings of words and concepts live as vectors. If that space undergoes spectral collapse,
All the concepts mush together, or they only get distinguished along one or two axes.
exactly. The model loses its ability to represent nuances. It becomes semantically impoverished. If you apply the harmonic spectrohedron constraint to the covariance of these embeddings during training, you are structurally forcing the system to keep its conceptual energy spread out. You guarantee the representations remain rich, isotropic, capable of capturing diverse meanings. This could make the model more robust, less prone to weird biases or failures when it encounters new situations.
Fascinating. And for multi-agent systems and groupthink.
Similar idea. If you track the covariance matrix of the agent states or influence vectors and reflect it off the spectrohedron boundary,
You cap the dominance of the consensus vector.
you structurally limit the magnitude of groupthink. The minimal correction acts like a kind of structural immune system for the collective, forcing influence back towards a more evenly distributed state, geometrically encouraging diversity of thought or behavior.
And market stability, attention maps. The applications seem quite broad.
Anywhere you have a system whose internal structure, its correlations, its dominant modes, matters for stability or fairness, this idea of covariance governance via harmonic reflection could potentially apply. It's about regulating the shape of variation itself.
Okay, the concepts are powerful, the application's compelling. But for engineers, for scientists, for policymakers to really trust this, it can't just be intuition and nice pictures. It needs a rock-solid mathematical foundation.
Absolutely critical. None of this works conceptually or practically without the rigorous theory that guarantees it behaves as expected. We need to ground this intuition.
So let's touch on that formal theory. It starts with the scorecard problem itself, formally defined.
Yes. Formally, the Skorokhod problem is defined on a closed convex set PT, or polytope, or spectrohedron. Given an input-driving signal, think of it as the desired but potentially unsafe path. We are looking for a pair of output paths, the reflected path QT and the cumulative correction path TT. These must satisfy three conditions.
Okay, where are they?
1, TT must always remain inside the set put. That's the primary constraint. 2, the relationship KET plus KT must hold. The actual path is the desired path plus the correction.
Makes sense. The correction bridges the gap.
3, this is the minimal correction part. The correction QT can only increase when QT is right on the boundary of $2. And crucially, the direction of the correction, TTT, must always lie within the normal cone NPQP at that boundary point.
That's the mathematical encoding of the perpendicular push we talked about.
Precisely. It ensures the correction acts only when needed and in the most efficient direction. Proving that such a QT all exist and are unique relies on some heavy mathematical machinery. Tools from functional analysis, specifically maximal monotone operator theory. It sounds complicated, but it provides the guarantees we need.
And what are those key guarantees for someone wanting to implement this?
The big ones are existence, uniqueness, and continuity. Theorem 2.1 in the source material basically states that for any reasonable continuous driving signal, $660, and any closed convex set $, a unique continuous solution KT$ to the Score Cod problem exists.
So you don't have to worry about the math breaking down or multiple possible safe paths emerging or the system suddenly jumping discontinuously.
Exactly. Existence means a solution is always there. Uniqueness means there's only one correct reflected path. Continuity means the output depends smoothly on the input.
And what about stability? If my input signal changes just a little bit, does my safe output QT also change just a little bit? Or could it go haywire?
That's guaranteed by a crucial property. The Score Cod Map itself, the function gamma pad that takes sex DDTT, is one Lipschitz continuous.
One Lipschitz, meaning?
In practical terms, it means the map is non-expansive. The distance between two reflected paths Q and $2 is always less than or equal to the distance between their corresponding input paths, $6 and $6.
So it doesn't amplify errors or noise. Small input changes lead to small output changes.
Exactly. That stability is absolutely fundamental for building reliable control systems. The minimal intervention approach inherently provides this mathematical stability.
Okay. And the long-term behavior, the convergence to maximum entropy, is that mathematically guaranteed too?
Yes. For the specific case where the driving signal is diffusion process, like Brownian motion, with zero drift inside the polytope, the theory confirms that the unique invariant probability distribution for the reflected process QTES is the uniform maximum entropy law on PABSECT.
So the system is ergodic, meaning time averages converge to that fair uniform state.
Correct. The geometry plus the minimal reflection law mathematically enforce long-term neutrality and maximum spread.
And just to confirm, all this rigor existence, uniqueness, Lipschitz continuity, the maximum entropy result it holds, even when we move from reflecting vectors in a polytope to reflecting matrices in the harmonic spectrahedron.
Yes, remarkably, the core theoretical framework extends to the matrix-valued Skorokhod problem defined on the harmonic spectrahedron mathematical alpha. The proofs are more technical, involving analysis in the space of symmetric matrices, but the fundamental guarantees remain. We have existence, uniqueness, and Lipschitz continuity for covariance governance, too.
So the mathematical foundations seem really solid, both for simple state reflection and for this more advanced structural regulation.
They are. It's a well-established, powerful branch of mathematics, providing the bedrock for these ideas.
So bringing this all together, what was really explored today feels like more than just a clever mathematical trick.
I think so, right.
And just to confirm, we're talking about the AGI Architect Entrance Exam.
Right,
Now,
yes.
this was a 500-mark assessment, and it was designed to be conceptually just grueling.
Yes.
Really testing how people could synthesize ideas across deep equilibrium models, geometric governance, and some pretty advanced fairness optimization techniques.
Yes. The bar was set astronomically high. The material requires an understanding not just of the formulas,
Not at all.
It's about the fundamental geometric and topological requirements for stable computation.
Exactly. And the results, well, they were brutal. The class average really struggled, hitting only 158 out of 500.
Wow, only 158.
Yeah. It was a test of finding that structural stability in these incredibly complex nonlinear systems. And the second highest score, which was honestly a truly stellar performance by Anjali Ra, that was 320. A score that really suggested a thorough systematic understanding. Very impressive.
A very strong score. But then there was Sundarsan Reddy.
Sundarsan. He scored a perfect 500 out of 500.
Perfect. 500.
Absolute conceptual full house. It didn't just break the grading curve, it shattered it. It actually triggered an immediate audit of the exam questions themselves.
I bet. People must have thought the test was flawed.
Yeah. And the sources, they capture that immediate chaos, that confusion and awe. And it perfectly summarizes this core conceptual divide we see in modern deep learning. When he was asked about his process, one of his classmates apparently just quipped, "You didn't overshoot, bro. You inverted the Jacobian."
That's brilliant. It speaks volumes.
It really does. And Sundarsan's own reflection, his immediate sort of post-exam thought process, that's exactly our launch pad for this deep dive.
What did he say?
He genuinely asked, almost puzzled, "I thought we all agreed we'd just computed implicitly at equilibrium. Was I supposed to explicitly unroll the problem?"
Wow. Okay. That right there, that is the mission for us today. We need to understand how someone could internalize this incredibly dense material on implicit computation and geometric constraints so thoroughly. So we're going to try and unlock the frameworks he conquered, starting right at the heart of that state. Deep equilibrium models, DEQs. Okay, let's unpack this concept. Implicit at equilibrium. For decades, deep learning meant stacking layers. Explicitly, right?
Right, one layer after another.
You had 100, maybe 1,000 layers, and computation just meant passing the signal through step by step, layer by layer. What observations started to challenge this sequential, explicit way of thinking?
The core motivation for DEQs, it comes from recognizing a point of diminishing returns, really.
Yeah.
Researchers started noticing that in very deep sequential models.
Like RNNs or ResNet.
Exactly, like those. The hidden layer activations, let's call them ZAR, they often start converging. They settle down towards a stable, unchanging state as you keep adding more depth as dollar gets bigger. And this stable state, that's what we call fixed point, Z star.
So if the, say, 98th layer and the 99th layer are giving you almost identical outputs, why even bother running the 99th layer? The system's basically reached a kind of functional steady state.
Precisely. Why pay the computational cost for stacking dollar layers if the answer isn't really changing much? A DEQ defines the network output directly as that equilibrium point.
Okay.
It basically bypasses the sequential computation and just says, look, we're going to find the fixed point Z star that solves this implicit equation. And that equation is Z star E star.
Z bar theta is the transformation function.
Yeah, the weight-tied nonlinear transformation function applied over and over again, theoretically. And sig star is the input.
So this means you have to solve a root finding problem. You're looking for the state star layer where the function g theta equals 0, the point where the output matches the input to the function.
Exactly. And there's a foundational mathematical requirement here. To guarantee that such a state not only exists, but is unique and reliable, that's crucial.
What's the guarantee?
This is where topology comes in and gives us the safety net. The transformation function, phi theta, it must be contractive.
Contractive. Okay, what does that mean in plain language for us?
It means that applying the function theta rin repeatedly always shrinks the distance between any two inputs.
Oh, okay.
Imagine throwing two pebbles into a whirlpool or a vortex. No matter how far apart they start, they inevitably spiral closer and closer together towards the same center point.
Right.
That center point is the fixed point star land, and it's this contractive property that lets us invoke the Banach fixed point theorem.
And that theorem?
That theorem guarantees the existence and, critically, the uniqueness of solder land. This is absolutely vital for stable training. If you had multiple possible fixed points, the network could oscillate or just be really unstable during training.
Got it. So the math ensures the model isn't just like hoping to find an answer somewhere. It guarantees there's a single stable target it can converge to.
Precisely.
Now, how does the DEQ actually find this target Z star during the forward pass? They can't just iterate infinitely in practice.
No, exactly. They use sophisticated iterative root finding methods, just standard iteration, just applying throughout till all is over. That's often way too slow to converge.
Okay.
So the sources really highlight the use of Broyden's method. It's a type of quasi-Newton approach.
Quasi-Newton?
Yeah, and it's the practical choice because it solves a fundamental computational bottleneck you get with the standard Newton's method.
Let's talk about that bottleneck. Newton's method is known to be faster, mathematically speaking, convergence-wise, but it has this crippling cost in large neural networks, doesn't it?
It really does. Standard Newton's method needs you to compute and then invert the full Jacobian matrix of that residual function, the least data.
The matrix of all the partial derivatives.
Exactly. And you have to do it at every single iteration of the root finding process. Now, if your hidden state dimension, dollar, is massive, and it often is, think $165,000 or more in big language models.
Yeah.
Inverting and all dollar times n matrix, that has a cubic cost complexity. It's no dollars.
Order n cubed. Ouch.
Yeah. That calculation alone could take hours, maybe even days, making training just completely impossible.
So that cubic cost is pretty much the definition of computationally prohibitive at the scale we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So Broyden's method somehow gets around this. It sidesteps that cost.
It does. Broyden's method is the efficient workaround here. It uses what are called low-rank updates to approximate the inverse Jacobian incrementally.
Ah, it approximates it.
Yes. Crucially, it never explicitly computes or inverts the full massive Jacobian matrix. This drastically reduces the cost complexity per iteration, and this approximation allows the forward pass to converge reasonably quickly and efficiently to that target star.
Okay, so that handles the forward pass. But the real conceptual breakthrough, the thing Sundarsan was hinting at, the memory miracle, as the sources call it, that happens in the backward pass. Why is standard backpropagation just impossible in a DEQ?
Because a DEQ is, theoretically speaking, an infinite depth network.
Because you keep applying the same function.
Exactly. If you tried to unroll it for standard backprop, store all the intermediate activations you normally need.
The chain rule dependencies.
Right. You would need unbounded memory. The memory requirement would just balloon indefinitely, making it totally impossible to train even a moderately sized model. You'd run out of RAM instantly.
So how does the DEQ solution get around this implicit differentiation? How does that work?
Implicit differentiation is the key insight. It cleverly exploits the fact that ZO star is a fixed point. It uses a powerful mathematical tool called the implicit function theorem.
Okay.
This theorem allows you to compute the gradient of the loss function with respect to the network weights, theta, directly at the fixed point theorem.
Directly at the fixed point.
Directly. You don't need to store the entire path taken to get there.
Yeah.
You only need the final destination, table, and you compute the gradients right there.
Which means the memory usage is constant, regardless of the effective depth of the network.
Constant memory, exactly.
Okay.
The sources cite observed memory reductions of up to 88%. That's not just a minor tweak. That's a fundamental shift in what becomes architecturally possible.
A game changer.
Really is. But just like the forward pass needed that contractive property for stability, the backward pass also needs a stable gradient calculation. This requires that the Jacobian of the residual function dl theta must be invertible at the fixed point star.
Invertible. Okay, why?
If the Jacobian were singular, meaning not invertible, the solution space would collapse at that point.
Yeah.
It would make the gradient calculation unstable or potentially undefined. You couldn't reliably figure out how to update the weights.
Got it. And similar to how Brown's method avoids the big matrix inversion in the forward pass, we presumably need an efficient way to compute these gradients without building the full Jacobian again.
Precisely. We rely on computing something called the vector Jacobian product, or VJP.
VJP.
Instead of explicitly calculating that huge $1 times no Jacobian matrix and then multiplying it by the incoming gradient vector, the VJP is computed efficiently using another iterative method, typically by solving a related linear system.
Ah, okay.
Again, this cleverly avoids the prohibitive Dirac-Setra calculation. It's really the core mathematical trick that makes the backward pass computationally feasible.
So let's touch on the architecture a bit more. This idea of infinite depth is simulated using weight tying, right? Applying the exact same transformation of theta at every conceptual layer. What does this weight tying actually achieve beyond just simulating infinite depth?
It acts as an incredibly strong form of regularization. Think about it. If every single layer has to obey the exact same rules, the same transformation, the model is inherently discouraged from learning very specific, maybe overfitted details that are unique only to the training data. It's forced to learn more robust, generalizable rules because the functional equilibrium, that star of the star, has to hold everywhere at every step.
That makes sense. It enforces consistency. And this leads to a really fascinating theoretical claim mentioned in the sources. The universality theorem for DEQs.
Yes.
It apparently states that stacking multiple DEQ modules on top of each other does not actually create any extra representational power compared to just having a single, wider DEQ module. What's the practical implication of that?
It fundamentally reframes what deep means in this context.
Yeah.
It suggests that if you need your model to handle more complexity, you should be investing in the width of the single DEQ module, increasing its hidden state dimension $9.
Ah, making SAR the bigger vector.
Exactly.
Yes.
Rather than trying to chain multiple fixed point solvers together sequentially. The maximum representational power seemed to be captured within that single unified equilibrium state. Stacking doesn't add more fundamental capability.
Interesting. So to make this practical, say in something like a DQ transformer, how do you get the input signal into the system? If the equilibrium state is trying to be static, how does it actually respond to different inputs?
Good question. The input obviously have to condition the equilibrium state somehow. This is usually done through input injection. Let's call the input sequence tilde.
Okay.
This input sequence, or representations derived from it, gets added into the core matrices used in the attention mechanism, typically the query, Q, key, A, and value V matrices within the weight-tied multi-head self-attention module.
Ah, so the input modifies the transformation in theta itself for each specific input.
Exactly. Without that injection, the fixed points D star would be the same regardless of the input $6, which would make the model pretty useless for tasks like translation or anything sequence dependent.
Okay, recapping DEQs. Massive memory savings, conceptual elegance, strong regularization through weight tying. What's the core trade-off? You mentioned something earlier that limits their ubiquitous adoption right now.
The main trade-off is usually runtime. Because the forward pass isn't just a single feed-forward calculation like in standard networks.
It's that iterative search.
It's that iterative search using Broyden's method, yes,
Yeah.
that can just be slower. There's this constant tension between speed and accuracy, which is often dictated by the iteration limit you set for the root finder.
So if you try to save time by cutting the iteration short,
You might not fully converge. You might end up with an unstable or inaccurate estimate of the true equilibrium cirrus star.
and the sources also suggest, interestingly, that the number of iterations needed for convergence tends to creep up gradually during the training process.
That's right. It seems like the model learns to exploit the stability properties more as it trains, making the search for the fixed point marginally harder, requiring a few more steps over time.
So it's this dynamic tension. DEQs offer this incredible promise efficiency, structural integrity, but they require careful management of that iterative convergence cost.
Exactly. It's a balance.
That idea of structural integrity, though, and the mechanism for actually promoting fairness within the optimization objective itself. It isn't just relying on the projection. The sources mention including an entropy regularizer.
That's right. Adding an entropy term to the objective function plays a crucial role. Entropy maximization naturally encourages solutions where the probabilities in $6 are more spread out, more uniform.
Why is that helpful?
It discourages the optimization process from making premature overly confident, greedy commitments to specific city position assignments too early on. It essentially promotes keeping options open longer, exploring a more diverse range of potential tour structures.
Which is inherently a kind of fairness property itself, avoiding bias towards early, potentially suboptimal choices.
Precisely. It encourages diverse and non-greedy assignment, which aligns well with many notions of fairness.
Okay, so it finds a solution that is closest to satisfying while potentially still respecting structural fairness or balance constraints encoded in the geometry.
Precisely. It can find the nearest point in some geometric sense to the perhaps empty intersection of all constraint regions. In many practical applications, getting a balanced closest to satisfying assignment is far more useful than just getting a binary nope impossible verdict.
That makes a lot of sense. The pattern seems really clear.
What's the pattern?
It's avoid explicit, step-by-step, potentially explosive computation. Instead, find a continuous, geometrically constrained space that captures the essence of the problem. Then, find the optimal solution within that space, often using minimal intervention, projection-based methods to enforce the constraints.
That's a great summary. It's about leveraging the structure of the continuous space.
And this brings us full circle back to Sundarsan Reddy, because he didn't just understand this pattern. The sources suggest he almost lived it during his preparation.
Yeah, Sundarsan Reddy's 3-month preparation regimen. It wasn't just about cramming facts or memorizing formulas by rote. It seems it was a very conscious effort to convert explicit knowledge into a kind of implicit, stable cognitive state.
You mean he treated his own mind like a DEQ, searching for a single, stable equilibrium point of understanding?
That's exactly the analogy the sources hint at. He was looking for that stable, non-degenerate, fixed point of knowledge, not just a sequence of steps to follow.
The description of his process is fascinating. It's described as a blend of monk, hacker, and explorer. Let's start with the monk phase, weeks 1 and 2. Listening for the silence. Why the focus on avoiding notation? That seems counterintuitive for studying math-heavy topics.
It seems it was a deliberate form of self-imposed, implicit computation.
He was forcing himself to internalize the structure.
Exactly. If he couldn't recall or reconstruct the logical structure instantly without the explicit notation, then he hadn't truly found the fixed point of that concept in his mind. He was forcing the convergence of the idea itself, aiming for stability, not just memorizing the trajectory.
Wow. So on exam day, he wasn't really solving the problems in the traditional sense. He was more like reporting the state of his internal fixed point for each question.
That's one way to think about it. What was his final mantra before going in?
The source is quoted as equilibrium first, then gradient, harmony next, then reflect.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It suggests that when you achieve true mastery, the problem itself almost disappears. Only the inherent structural answer remains. This journey shows us that this idea of implicit learning isn't just an architectural choice for building AI. It can potentially be a cognitive strategy for humans trying to master complexity.
So what we've seen today is this fascinating alignment. The theoretical mastery required by the exam finding implicit, geometrically constrained solutions seems perfectly mirrored in the preparation method of the person who achieved that perfect score.
It really does. His insistence on finding the stable equilibrium, mapping the connections, stress testing assumptions, enforcing consistency through cross-modal grounding, could all that be viewed as a form of self-regularization, a way he ensured his own internal knowledge system never entered a degenerate, overfitted, or unstable state? Perhaps the ultimate deep dive is into our own learning processes. How do we ensure our internal knowledge systems are structurally sound, globally consistent, locally refined, and always converge to the most efficient and stable fixed point? Something for you to think about.
Definitely something to ponder. We'll leave you with that thought until the next deep dive.
See you next time.